Listen carefully. Schopenhauer declared that ordinary people merely think how they shall spend their time, but a man of talent tries to use it. If you have experienced systematic exclusion from social groups despite your best efforts to connect, today you will understand the philosophical mechanisms that make society reject intelligent minds. This is not about conspiracy or deliberate cruelty. This is about understanding the unconscious psychological processes that drive groups to identify and eliminate members who think differently. Today, you will learn Schopenhauer's complete theory of why smart people face inevitable social exclusion, how this exclusion operates at individual and institutional levels, and why understanding this theory is essential for your psychological survival. If you are ready to understand Schopenhauer's theory of social exclusion and learn how to navigate a world designed to reject intelligence, leave "I understand the mechanism" in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications for more philosophical truths about consciousness and society. Schopenhauer's theory begins with a fundamental observation about human consciousness. He argued that humanity exists on a spectrum of awareness, from those who operate almost entirely on instinct and unconscious drives to the rare few who achieve genuine philosophical consciousness. Most people live in what Schopenhauer called the grip of the blind will, an unconscious force that drives behavior without reflection or understanding. These people do not think deeply about their actions, do not question their beliefs, do not examine their motivations. They simply respond to impulses, follow conventions, pursue immediate satisfactions without higher reflection. The intelligent person operates differently. They possess what Schopenhauer called the capacity for representation, the ability to step back from immediate experience and examine it objectively. They can observe their own consciousness, analyze their motivations, question their assumptions, consider alternative perspectives. This capacity for representation is what separates philosophical consciousness from mere biological existence. It is what makes you intelligent, and it is precisely what makes you threatening to those who lack it. Why threatening? Because consciousness is contagious but uncomfortable. When an intelligent person questions assumptions that everyone else accepts automatically, they create cognitive dissonance in others. Suddenly, people who never thought about why they believe X or do Y are forced to consider these questions. This consideration is uncomfortable. It disrupts the automatic functioning that makes ordinary life possible. Most people do not want to think deeply about their lives, their beliefs, their society. They want to act automatically, follow conventions without reflection, pursue socially approved goals without questioning whether those goals make sense. Your presence as an intelligent person disrupts this automatic functioning. Even if you say nothing challenging, even if you try to fit in, your consciousness itself creates disturbance. People sense that you are observing, analyzing, seeing through their performances. This sensing happens unconsciously. They cannot articulate why you make them uncomfortable, but they feel it. And this feeling triggers the exclusion mechanism. Schopenhauer identified several specific psychological mechanisms through which groups exclude intelligent members. First is the mechanism of threat detection. Human beings evolved as tribal creatures whose survival depended on group cohesion. Any threat to group unity triggered defensive responses. In ancient environments, these threats were physical: predators, rival tribes, natural disasters. But humans also evolved to detect social threats, things that might destabilize group cohesion even without physical danger. Intelligence is a social threat because it introduces complexity, ambiguity, and questioning into situations where the group needs simplicity, certainty, and agreement. When a tribe needs to make a quick decision about whether to fight or flee, the member who says, "Well, it's complicated, we need to consider multiple perspectives," endangers everyone. When a community needs to maintain social order through shared beliefs, the person who questions those beliefs threatens stability. Evolution selected for psychological mechanisms that identify and neutralize these social threats. In modern contexts, physical danger from questioning is minimal, but the psychological mechanisms remain. When you question a group's shared assumptions, when you introduce complexity into simple narratives, when you fail to provide the emotional certainty the group craves, you trigger ancient threat detection systems. Group members experience you as dangerous, even though you pose no physical threat. And they respond with exclusion, the social equivalent of exile from the tribe. Second is the mechanism of cognitive load reduction. Thinking is metabolically expensive. The human brain uses disproportionate energy relative to its size. Throughout evolutionary history, energy was scarce. So organisms that could achieve goals with minimal thinking had survival advantages. This created psychological pressure toward cognitive shortcuts, automatic responses, heuristic thinking that gets good enough results without deep analysis. Most people operate on these cognitive shortcuts most of the time. They categorize situations quickly, make snap judgments, follow established patterns, rely on conventional wisdom. This approach works well enough for ordinary life. You do not need to philosophically analyze every decision. You can navigate most situations through pattern recognition and habit. But intelligent people cannot help engaging in deeper analysis. Your mind automatically looks beyond surface appearances, considers complications, evaluates evidence, traces logical implications. This deeper analysis creates cognitive load, not just for you, but for everyone trying to interact with you. When you speak, you often include nuance, qualifications, multiple perspectives. Understanding your communication requires more cognitive effort than understanding simple statements. When you question assumptions, others must think harder about things they previously accepted automatically. This increased cognitive load is exhausting for people whose minds are not built for sustained analytical thinking. Groups respond to this exhaustion by excluding the source. If interactions with you require more mental effort than interactions with others, people will prefer others. This is not conscious discrimination. It is automatic energy conservation. Your intelligence makes you expensive to interact with, and humans unconsciously avoid expensive interactions when cheaper alternatives are available. Third is the mechanism of status threat. Human social hierarchies traditionally depended on easily observable traits: physical strength, wealth, family lineage, age, gender. These hierarchies were relatively stable because the traits determining position were visible and hard to fake. But intelligence is invisible and difficult to measure objectively. This creates profound status anxiety. In any group containing significant intelligence variation, those with less intelligence face constant threat to their status. They cannot compete on intellectual grounds, but they also cannot admit this inability without losing status. So they must find ways to neutralize intelligent members without explicitly acknowledging intelligence differences. The solution is to redefine status criteria to exclude intelligence, or even make it a liability. Groups do this by elevating other qualities over intelligence: social skills, emotional intelligence, teamwork, likability, cultural fit. Notice that all these qualities are subjectively evaluated. No objective measure can prove someone has good social skills or is a good team player. This subjectivity allows groups to exclude intelligent members while maintaining the fiction that everyone is being evaluated fairly. You are not excluded because you are too intelligent, which would be acknowledging intelligence hierarchy. You are excluded because you don't fit the culture or aren't a team player, which preserves the egalitarian fiction while achieving the same result. Schopenhauer observed this mechanism in academic philosophy, where truly original thinkers were often excluded in favor of competent but conventional scholars who posed no threat to established hierarchies. The academic system claimed to reward intelligence and originality, but actually rewarded conformity and social compatibility. This contradiction persists today across institutions that claim to value intelligence but actually value compliance. Fourth is the mechanism of emotional regulation. Most human social interaction serves emotional rather than informational purposes. People communicate to feel connected, validated, secure. They want emotional resonance, not logical precision. When someone shares a problem, they usually want sympathy, not solutions. When someone expresses an opinion, they want agreement, not analysis. When someone tells a story, they want emotional engagement, not factual correction. Intelligent people often fail to provide this emotional function. You listen to someone's problem and immediately start analyzing solutions. You hear an opinion and evaluate its logical validity. You notice factual errors in stories and cannot help correcting them. From your perspective, you are being helpful, providing useful information, engaging seriously with what others say. But from their perspective, you are being cold, missing the point, failing to provide the emotional support they actually wanted. This failure creates perception that you lack empathy or social skills. In reality, you may have empathy, but you express it through problem solving rather than emotional mirroring. You may have social understanding, but you prioritize accuracy over feelings. Groups interpret this difference as deficiency and exclude you for failing to meet emotional expectations. The more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to prioritize logic over emotion, and the more you will be excluded from groups that prioritize emotion over logic. Fifth is the mechanism of narrative simplification. Humans think in stories. We understand reality through narratives that have clear characters, motivations, moral lessons. These narratives must be simple enough to remember and communicate. Complexity undermines narrative coherence. If a story requires constant qualification, multiple perspectives, acknowledgement of ambiguity, it loses emotional impact and becomes difficult to share. Intelligent people naturally complicate narratives. Someone tells a simple story, X is bad because Y. You immediately think, but what about Z? And is Y really true? And doesn't context matter? Your complications are accurate. Reality is complex. But your accuracy destroys the narrative's emotional and social function. The story was not really about truth. It was about creating shared meaning, establishing group values, bonding through common judgment. When you complicate narratives, you fail to participate in this bonding ritual. Worse, you undermine the ritual for others. If you question whether X is really bad, you make others doubt their judgment, which makes them uncomfortable, which makes them resent you. Groups exclude narrative complicators because simplified narratives are essential for group cohesion. And cohesion matters more than accuracy. Schopenhauer synthesized these mechanisms into a comprehensive theory. Intelligent people face social exclusion because intelligence threatens group cohesion through multiple simultaneous pathways. You trigger threat detection, increase cognitive load, threaten status hierarchies, fail emotional expectations, and complicate narratives. Each mechanism alone would create friction. Combined, they make your exclusion nearly inevitable once intelligence exceeds a certain threshold relative to group average. This theory explains why exclusion intensifies with intelligence level. Moderately intelligent people can navigate social situations by hiding their full capacity, simplifying their communication, meeting emotional expectations. But highly intelligent people cannot maintain this performance consistently. Your natural thinking is too different from the norm. Eventually, you slip, reveal your actual analytical process, and trigger the exclusion mechanisms. The theory also explains why exclusion happens even in supposedly intellectual environments. Universities, research institutions, intellectual professions. These contexts claim to value intelligence, but they still operate on human social dynamics. The threat detection, status anxiety, emotional expectations, all these mechanisms still function. You can be excluded from a philosophy department or technology company for exactly the same reasons you are excluded from ordinary social groups. The institutional context is different, but the psychological mechanisms are identical. What are the practical implications of Schopenhauer's theory? First, understand that your exclusion is not personal. The people excluding you are not evil. They are not consciously deciding to punish you for being intelligent. They are responding to unconscious discomfort triggered by mechanisms that evolved millions of years ago. You cannot reason with these mechanisms. You cannot explain yourself into acceptance. The psychological processes driving exclusion operate below conscious awareness. Second, recognize that trying to hide your intelligence is ultimately futile. You might successfully moderate your communication, avoid complicated topics, meet emotional expectations in short interactions. But sustained relationships eventually reveal your true nature. You cannot maintain a simplified persona indefinitely. Eventually, exhausted by the performance, you will revert to your natural self, and the exclusion mechanisms will activate. Better to be rejected as yourself than accepted as a performance. Third, accept that some environments will always exclude you, regardless of your behavior. If a group's average intelligence is significantly below yours, if a culture strongly values emotional conformity over analytical thinking, if an institution prioritizes social harmony over truth-seeking, you cannot succeed there no matter what you do. The mismatch is structural, not personal. Stop wasting energy trying to fit into fundamentally incompatible environments. Fourth, seek environments that minimize these exclusion mechanisms. Such environments are rare but exist. Some academic subfields genuinely reward analytical thinking. Some companies actually value truth over social harmony. Some communities attract intelligent misfits who understand each other. These environments are not perfect. They still operate on human psychology. But they are more tolerant of intelligence because participants have learned to manage the exclusion mechanisms consciously. Fifth, build psychological resilience against inevitable exclusion. Even in optimal environments, you will face some rejection. Understanding Schopenhauer's theory helps you interpret this rejection accurately. When someone excludes you, you do not think, "What is wrong with me?" You think, "Which mechanism am I triggering?" This analytical distance prevents internalization of rejection as personal failure. Let me give you concrete examples of how these mechanisms operate in different contexts. In workplace settings, imagine you're in a meeting where a manager proposes a strategy. You immediately see 3 logical flaws that will cause the strategy to fail. You have 2 options. Say nothing, let the flawed strategy proceed, maintain social harmony but doom the project. Or speak up, explain the flaws, save the project but trigger exclusion mechanisms. If you speak up, what happens? The manager feels status threatened because you have implicitly demonstrated superior analytical ability. Other meeting participants experience increased cognitive load, trying to follow your reasoning. The group narrative, "We are a competent team implementing a good strategy," becomes complicated. Emotional tone shifts from confident to uncertain. Even if you are completely right, even if you save the project, you have become a problem. The group will find ways to marginalize you, leaving you off future project teams, excluding you from informal networks, eventually pushing you out of the organization. In friendship contexts, imagine a friend shares a personal problem. They are upset about a conflict with a romantic partner. They tell you a story that clearly presents them as the victim and their partner as unreasonable. You immediately notice that the story leaves out information, that your friend's behavior probably contributed to the conflict, that the situation is more complex than presented. If you point this out, even gently, you fail the emotional expectation. Your friend wanted validation and sympathy, not analysis. By offering analysis, you signal that you prioritize truth over their feelings. This triggers perception that you lack empathy. Your friend feels judged rather than supported. The friendship weakens. Over time, as this pattern repeats, your friend gradually distances from you, eventually stopping contact entirely. You are confused because you were trying to help by providing accurate perspective. But help was not what was wanted. In romantic relationships, imagine a partner shares excitement about a new opportunity, a job, a trip, a project. They present this opportunity in entirely positive terms, seeing only benefits. You immediately recognize risks, complications, potential negative consequences. You share these concerns because you care about your partner and want them to make informed decisions. But your partner experiences this response as you raining on their parade, being negative, failing to share their enthusiasm. The emotional expectation was validation and shared excitement. By providing realistic analysis, you fail this expectation. Over multiple instances, your partner begins to see you as pessimistic, unsupportive, someone who makes them feel bad about their ideas. The relationship deteriorates, not because you are wrong in your analysis, but because you are prioritizing accuracy over emotional resonance. These examples show that Schopenhauer's exclusion mechanisms operate in every social context, personal and professional, intimate and casual. You cannot escape them by changing environments. You can only manage them by understanding how they work and making conscious decisions about when to trigger them and when to suppress your natural responses for strategic purposes. Schopenhauer himself navigated these mechanisms by withdrawing from social participation almost entirely. He recognized that he could not consistently meet the emotional and cognitive expectations of ordinary social interaction. Rather than constantly triggering exclusion and experiencing repeated rejection, he chose preemptive isolation. He limited social contact to brief, superficial interactions that did not require sustained performance. He found satisfaction in solitary intellectual work rather than in human relationships. This is one solution, perhaps the most honest solution, but it requires accepting profound loneliness. Most intelligent people are not ready for Schopenhauer's radical isolation. They still hope for meaningful human connection, still believe they can find people who will accept them as they are. This hope is not entirely false. Rare individuals and environments do exist where intelligence is less threatening. But Schopenhauer's theory warns against overestimating how common such acceptance will be. The theory also has implications for how intelligent people should raise intelligent children. If you are intelligent and have intelligent children, they will face the same exclusion mechanisms you faced. Your responsibility is not to teach them to hide their intelligence, which creates psychological damage, but to teach them to understand these mechanisms, to expect exclusion, to build identity independent of social acceptance. Intelligent children who understand why they are excluded suffer less than intelligent children who internalize exclusion as personal failure. Now let me address the objection that this theory is too pessimistic, that it denies the possibility of genuine acceptance, that it justifies giving up on human connection. Schopenhauer's theory is not pessimistic in the sense of being false. It is pessimistic in the sense of acknowledging uncomfortable truth. Yes, the theory limits hope for widespread acceptance, but false hope is more destructive than accurate pessimism. Better to understand that acceptance will be rare and treasure it when found, than to expect acceptance everywhere and feel constantly disappointed and confused by rejection. The theory does not deny that genuine acceptance is possible. It explains why such acceptance is rare and helps you recognize it when it occurs. When you encounter someone who does not activate the exclusion mechanisms in response to your intelligence, who can match your analytical depth, who values truth over emotional comfort, who appreciates complexity rather than demanding simplification, you have found something precious. Schopenhauer's theory teaches you to recognize and value these rare connections. The theory does not justify giving up on human connection. It justifies becoming more selective about where you invest energy. Stop trying to force connection with fundamentally incompatible people and environments. Stop wasting years trying to make friendships work with those who will inevitably exclude you. Stop torturing yourself trying to fit into workplaces that cannot accommodate your intelligence. Instead, search more efficiently for the rare contexts where acceptance is possible and invest deeply in those contexts when found. In the comments, share which of Schopenhauer's exclusion mechanisms you have experienced most directly. Has your intelligence triggered status threat in colleagues? Have you failed emotional expectations in relationships? Have you complicated narratives and watched groups turn against you? Understanding which mechanisms you trigger most frequently helps you navigate social situations more strategically and accept exclusion less personally. Remember Schopenhauer's fundamental insight. Social exclusion of intelligent people is not a bug in human social psychology, but a feature. Not a problem to solve, but a reality to understand and navigate. Your intelligence makes you valuable intellectually, but dangerous socially. This contradiction cannot be resolved, only managed. Stop fighting mechanisms that have operated for millions of years. Start accepting that intelligence comes with inevitable social costs. That these costs are worth paying for the consciousness intelligence provides. That your worth is not determined by social acceptance, but by your capacity for understanding. This is Schopenhauer's theory. This is the truth about intelligence and society. This is why you have been excluded, why you will continue to be excluded, and why understanding this exclusion is essential for building a meaningful life despite it.